So to follow along this session, we will be developing a simple web application in order to get the maximize learning curves. You guys practice these things. So the prerequisites are when we are developing the application, we'll be using most popular JavaScript engine called Node. Okay, so make sure you have Node.js installed, npm installed, those kind of things. I'm not going to go through the basics and everything like that. I'll assume that you guys have Node.js installed within your machine. So we'll get started. We'll get starting after that. We will. I assume that you guys have the basics, prerequisites or basic application software. In this case, Node.js is installed within your machine. Okay. And next thing I would expect from you guys is you guys have a little bit of knowledge on creating an application, a simple application. But I will show from the ground up. But in a case where you don't understand the CLI and CLI components, just follow along. That would also help. But if you find these things complicated, just let me know. I will dial down a little bit. Okay. All right. Give me a second. What I'll do is I will. I'll open a terminal in my machine where I normally create applications. Okay. Let me share my screen. Let's share screen. Okay. Share the screen. I'm going to share the terminal. Hope you all of you can see my screen, at least the terminal for now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to check whether my prerequisites are in here. So I'm going to say not. I have the not version installed, so that I'm all good. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a simple application, a simple web application. And I will explain the architecture patterns and everything afterwards. So in order to create the web application, I'll be using a command line tool called Laravel CLI or NX for short. So if you guys do not know NX, it's a build tool which helps us to develop application more faster way. So it also support different frameworks, backend frameworks and front-end frameworks. So it will be easy for you guys to learn. If you want to have a React application, you can create using NX. If you have Angular application, yes. And if you have a certain backend application, you can also develop with frameworks like Nest.js, or if you have a plain old Express.js, you can do that. So NX is like a Swift knife when it is coming to developing applications. So I will be using that in order to create a simple web application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use npx to create a NX workspace. So NX workspace is like umbrella or like umbrella to our projects. We can have our backend, front ends, and everything in one singular repository. We call these things as monorepos. So it is like easy to create application. We will see in action how this monorepo works. Right now, I will just first create an NX workspace, and depending on your internet connection and everything, it will take a little bit of time. So currently, I think I'm good. So it's asking the organization name. So this is like a high-level name for your organization. So as I mentioned, this is gonna be what we call monorepo. That means all of your projects can be within the one single repository. So all your repository should be belonging to your organization. So better you give your organization name in here. So I will just for this demonstration purpose, I'm not going to use the exact name in this scenario, but I will use your course code. So organization name. In this scenario, I'll be using our course code that is ISA 226. For easiness, I will use the organization name like that, but feel free to use anything other than this. Okay. And it asks what is the project that you're going to be working with. You can have an React, Angular, or not. For this purpose, I'm going to be demonstrating MVC architecture and everything. So I'll be using an Angular application. And they have the standalone components and integrated monorepo. So if I select standalone, it will create Angular application only. But if I select integrated monorepo, that means I can have the Angular application as well as a backend application or even a React application if you like later on. We can have that things as well. So I'm gonna leave the room for expansion. So I will say integrated monorepo in this scenario. And the application name, I will just do not use something like test or something like that. Just have a generic name. So I have this idea of generating a game rental, game sharing application. So I will say game share. Okay. So the application name is going to be game share. Okay. And these are like pretty much standard thing, whether what is the styling that you need to use. So I'm not against CSS, but I like SCSS or SAS. Also, I'll use SAS. And in here, we will be asked what type of end-to-end test programs that we need to use. So Cypress is one of the things that I'm pretty much familiar with. Playwright is something new. So I'll go with Cypress for now. So this will be used for end-to-end testing. So we'll see that in a little bit. I'll just use Cypress. And there is a new movement from Angular that is what we call standalone components. So if you are new to Angular, just go with standalone component. If you are older, you might know module-based components, but that's nothing that you need to know. So let's have a standalone component. And would you like to have routing? Yes, I would like to have routing. That means if I want to change from one page to another, would you like to add the routing capabilities into your application? I would say yes. And this distributed cache is something from NX. So at the moment, we do not need, but if you need faster build times or faster application builds, you definitely look at this, but right now I'm gonna not use it. So just like basic thing that you need to do in order to set up the application. So it will just create a simple application for us and we can run the application afterwards. Okay. So while this is taking the whole world to my machine, it's going to take a little bit of time, NPM is, if you have worked with it, it is downloading the half of the internet to my machine at this time. So it will create my workspace, my application, and so on and so forth. Till that happens, okay, I think I have the application. What I'll do is I will open it using my Visual Studio Code. Okay. I will cd into the generated application and I will open it using the Visual Studio Code. Let me change my sharing so you guys can see it as well. Share my screen. I need to share this code, Google Chrome, and probably I don't need the my terminal anymore. So I think application is still being created, but hopefully you guys can see Visual Studio Code, right? You can see it, right? Raise your hand if you can see the screen. I mean, at least Visual Studio Code.
No, sir. Still we are
Sir,
looking that terminal.
Okay, let me share it once again. Studio. Let me stop sharing and share my screen. Where is it? Okay, I have this. I have VS Code in here. How about now? You guys can see VS Code, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So hopefully my application is generating by now. So I'll just leave it the generation up to it right now. I'm gonna give you guys a brief introduction on what we get out of the box when we create an application from NX tools. So basically, all the other things are like not mandatory to look at. I mean, there are like bunch of files that you guys would see. Do not focus on those things at first, but if you need some special manipulations or special things, you probably have to use these. But right now, we'll be focusing on the applications that we have created. So we only created one application called GainShare. Okay, the GainShare application right now, and there is additional application created for us, GainShare E2E. So these are two applications by default they are creating for us. So E2E stand for end-to-end testing. So we'll be looking at how we can run these E2E applications, how we can test our application using the Cypress framework that we selected by when we are creating. So this is our main application. This is where our main logic is going to be. Okay. And right now we can see the GainShare application created here under SRC. You will see like the basic application. So we have the index HTML and we main TS file and some styling that you need to work with. Right now, our focus should be in the app directory. Okay, so this is going to be the default application that NX is creating for us. So it has an HTML, CSS, some test file, configuration files, routings, and some another welcome component. Okay, so this is going to be the basic application. Let me check whether no, still the application is creating. So let me get let me explain the files in detail while the application is still generating. I mean, the skeleton is generated, but we are waiting on some node modules to be downloaded. So we'll give it some time to work. So in this application, we have a very simple basic application set up for us. And I'll explain what are these files from the starting point. So for any Angular application that you have created, the main TS is going to be like the starting point for our application. And it's going to be run by this index HTML. Okay, when we are talking about the index HTML, this is going to be the basic component that we will be working with, and it will bootstrap this app component section, right? What you can see it in here. So you don't have to dig into these things at the beginning. If you are really new, you can just ignore these things, but have an idea. This is where the index and the main HTS file is here, is there. And these are like the starting point for our application. And you will see this style.scss. So consider this style sheet as the global style sheet for your whole application. If you want to share a CSS style, you just place those things in here, then you will get the styling over there. And you have this routing configuration where you will use this, like if you have multiple pages. Right now we don't have multiple pages. If you have paging and those kind of things, we will look into this app routing once we set up other pages and everything. And app config, this is like the pattern that we are using for what do you call standalone application. So this is consider this is like the configuration for our application. Right now, we do not have much configuration in here. Only we are configuring the app route. Okay, so don't worry about these things. We will get into much more fine detail. So in the bootstrap process in main.ts, we provide two things. Start with this component. Okay, component, we'll look into what is a component right now. So start with this component and use this configuration to start this component. So that is like the basic idea that you can get. So we have some configuration in here. Okay, we'll see what are these configurations and what we need to change. So this one is the component. This is this first starting point of our application. So you guys can see it is named as app component in the main.ts. You can see this. This is the starting point for our application. If you go to our index.html, but you will see you won't see the app component, but you will see the selector. This is like HTML elements that we see. So in here we can see HTML element like this, and the HTML element is whatever the organization name we gave and root. So if you pay close attention to our app component, you will see the selector or the same name that is corresponding to here. So basically what we are doing is this app component, this is going to create a custom component for us, a custom HTML element. So what do you understand by a custom component? So you guys know basic HTML have pretty standard HTML5 components. Like we have the title tag, we have the base, we have the meta, we have like well-known ones like H1, H2, H3, and there are a lot of HTML tags available. HTML elements available that we can use out of the box that every browser knows how to interact with. So if I say H1, H1 is known by any browser out there, at least the modern browsers. So if I say H1, okay, Chrome, Safari, whatever the browser knows, okay, this is going to be a header tag. This is how I'm going to render this out. And similarly that the custom components that we are creating is an extension of what we are going to build. That means we can create our own elements, own components that is visible to the users. So right now we are creating this custom component or custom element, and it is called IS, the organization name and root. So we have a component definition. In Angular, we have this component definition like this, and the selector is where it says if you are using this in HTML, this is going to be the selector, or this is how the HTML will understand this component as a whole. And there are a few things you might probably know or have not encountered. Standalone means if you are coming from an older version, there is, as I mentioned earlier, there was a concept called modules. Right now, we are shifting away from modules. Under the hood, there is the module concept is there, but if you are new to Angular, just ignore it for now. So we are saying, okay, this is going to be a standalone components, and within this standalone component, I am going to be using few other imports. That means this component is not going to be a very simple component. I will have another components important to it. That means this component will utilize some other components. That means there is another component called a NX welcome component. This component will be used within this IS, the root component. Okay. And we'll see these things in a little bit. Right now, we just have important two other modules or two other components into here. Probably this is going to be component or modules that we are importing. So we'll see those things as well. Then we have something called template URL. That means whenever this app component is going to be, this app component is going to be showing its view, something that we need to see, that view is going to be denoted or shown by this app component HTML. So you guys can see the app component is the custom component that we are creating, and its view, what we need to show, what we need to see is coded at this app component.html. You guys can see that there is then thing called app component HTML. So whatever we are rendering out here, it will be visible in our browser. Okay. And the next thing that we'll see, the styling for this. So if you want to style this component, we will have some CSS and some styling to do. So those styling will be available on this. So at the app component, this is the view and this is the styling for it. So we have separated our styling and our HTML into different views. So if you're coming from a framework like React, it will be something a little bit different, because in React most of the time everything is handled in the JSX or TSX. Okay, so the view is going to be a view, the logic and the styling, or everything seems to be within one single functional component or class component. But in Angular, what we do is we try to separate those things as much as possible. So easy code maintenance. We'll see how we can do it further even. Okay, I think my application is ready. So if I want to serve this application, I need to see this application. What I have to do is I need to open a terminal, run this command nx serve, and the project name. The project name is game share. So I have to say game share. Okay. So while this is running, it will create my application and it's ready to serve. So right now it is serving under localhost 4200. So what I'll do is I will not use this base right now. I'll run the same application in my other terminal, which is might be not visible for you guys. So I will say nx serve game share, and I will open this. Hope you guys can see my Chrome as well.
Yes, so we can see.
You can see, right? Chrome is visible, right? You can see
Yes.
this? Okay,
Yeah.
nice. All right, so this is the basic application that we have created, but you guys did not see the hello there, welcome, game share and everything. This is not something that you guys saw in the code that we have looked into, but we will see what's how these things are hidden in this section. So right now, as I mentioned, the app component HTML is where the starting point of our application. And right now, in app component HTML, there is no such hello there, welcome, game share, and this kind of nice UI. It is not visible. But you can see another two components, the IES index welcome and the route outlet kind of things. So if I comment out route outlet, I won't see anything different. It will be showing me everything. But if I comment out this index welcome, you guys can see it is drawing me a blank screen. So that means whatever the content that I have seen, it is coming from this component. This is also a custom component that we can see. So I can go into this custom component if it is right name as its name suggests. It's gonna call the project organization name and the next welcome. So you guys can see this welcome component. Okay. So the sorry. So if you are guys from React, this will be something that you guys might like. Okay, but to be honest, I do not like this coding standard because everything in here is like too much. But the ecosystem that allows you to do that, So we have the selector as you guys can remember, this is the selector that we have seen in our app component. The same selector name that we see in here is in here. And we can see the standalone true, and we are importing only something called common module. And this template in here, we see something in our app component. We have the template URL, style URLs. In template URL, but in the NX component, this component has something called template. Okay, rather than having a separate file for the template, you can have all the things in what do you call HTML tag in here. Okay, so whatever the HTML content that you need to display, you can have a template. Okay, not template URL. If you are defining a URL, you have to point it to a file. Right now, it's say template, and within this bracket, the quotation marks that you see here, and you can put your HTML in here. So it is working as well. If you have styles, you can put it in here as well. If it is none, then you have to make it empty. So just leave this encapsulation for now. We just don't need to work with that. So we have created the component without any HTML files or CSS files separately. Everything that you can do is with template and styles. You can do this as well. If you're coming from React, you would probably love this method. But someone who is from Angular do not follow this concept. So from my end, honestly, I like the HTML, CSS, and component in a different file. So you can do either way. You have everything within one file, or you can separate this into separate files. And in order to use this NX welcome component, okay, we can't just work in app component. Okay, app component need to import that. That's why this imports section is all about. You need to import the NX welcome component. Then we can use this IS the NX welcome component within the app component. If you do not import this, if you do not import the welcome component, let me just delete this, and it will give you an error. Okay, we do not know about this component. Where is this component? What is this component? We do not know about this. Just you have to give us more idea about it. So if I import that component, the NX component within my app component, so no, app component knows about the NX welcome component, and it can render these HTML as you like. Okay, so this is like the basic of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to use these NX welcome components, so I'm going to remove it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this one as well. We do not need this one. And what we have empty canvas. Okay, so so if I want here, I can just say h1. I can say hello, welcome to basic of MVC. Okay, so you guys can see that it is instantly showing in here. What I'll do is I will make these two applications side by side, so we can code and we can see at the same time. So I will make this smaller as possible, and this one as much as in a seeable state. Hope you guys can see both VS Code and Chrome, I suppose. Yes.
Yes, sir, we can see.
Okay. I'll try my best to allocate space for both, and we'll have we'll see what we can do in this space. So as I mentioned, whatever we are changing in here, I can say hello, welcome to MVC. I can say, so basically, I can type whatever I want in a valid HTML format within the HTML component. I like to code, and if I hit save, you guys can see instantly it is showing in my my browser. So we know that okay, this code section, whatever we are typing in the HTML is getting rendered out here as well. So let me explain the basic of MVC architecture. Okay, so we talked about MVVM architecture. That's in the same way. In this application architecture, we have the view. In this scenario, the view is going to be this HTML page. Okay, the app.component.html is going to be our view. And the model in this scenario, the model is actually not implemented right now. So we have the view in here can be seen here. So see the controller, what we can do the manipulations and everything. We have the controller as within our app component. So whatever we are writing in here, the logics behind this, the logic, the manipulations, actions, and everything is handled by this controller. So we have this controller right around here. The app.component TS, the TypeScript file, act as the component in this scenario, and the app.component.html, this is acting as the view. So we have the V and C. So we do not see a model. MVC stand for model view controller. So we do not see a model. So we'll see model in a little bit later. Okay. So right now, the view is generated using HTML. The controller is generated using TypeScript, and probably the model is also going to be generated in TypeScript as well. Okay, so by defining these separate instructions, separate files, we have this MVC architecture within our application. Okay, so look at the architectural pattern in here. We have the views in a separate file, and it is something similar to HTML. It's actually going to be pretty much HTML as well, and we'll have some special things. It feel like HTML, right? It's feel like HTML what we are saying in here, everything. But there are certain things Angular do behind the screen. We'll see those things as well. So in the controller, you guys can see there is a variable. In here, it is called title, right? In here, the title is equal to game.share. So as I mentioned earlier, the view and the controller has a sync. They have this binding happens via the Angular framework. So the controller knows who is the view. This is the view, and this is the styles, and this is the selector, and so on and so forth. So whenever we want to update our view, at some point. So what we can do is we can define our variables in our controller, in our component, and we can render those things out in our view. So in order to do that, let's say we want to render out whatever the title variable holds. Right now, the title variable holds game share. So I want to show this in the view itself. So what I have to do is I can use something called a mustache brace. Okay, so you guys can see 2 curly braces open, 2 curly braces off. We call these things as mustache braces. So Angular uses mustache braces to bind the values which are available in the component or controller to the view. So we have something called title. We can have that in here by simply saying title in here. So within mustache braces, we can use the variable in that. So whatever the variable value holds, it will be rendered out in here. So you guys can see it is showing game share. So I can do something like that rather than showing it in a simple no element. I can put it in H1. You guys can see it is having the H1 capabilities as well. So by this way, we are calling this data binding. So that's why I told you this is almost HTML, because we can't have these things in HTML, right? HTML, if you have plain HTML and try to run these things, it will not bind these variables as we see. In Angular, that's not the case. We have the framework set up, the MVC set up for us. So we get the view and the controller synchronization. And whenever we want to use a variable, we want to use some variable to show in here, we can just simply bind using these binding, that we call these mustache braces. Using those things, we can show whatever we have in here. So if I come here and change the values in here, let's say IS 4.0 students are the best. Okay, I'm giving you guys some credit. So whenever I am saving this variable name, and what will happen is it's gonna automatically update in my view. So we know the view is updated whenever the controller is updated as well. But we need to make sure the binding is correct, the variable name is correct, and use the correct binding techniques. If I forgot to do something like this, you guys can see that is giving me an error. It is unknown, or you have done something wrong. To make sure you use the mustache braces in order to do the data binding. Okay, so we have the V, we have the C, and we will look into the N section in a little bit. So before I move on, I would like to give you guys some extra capabilities, so you guys will enjoy doing these things. So for example, I want to say I want to show some list of student names. Okay, so I want to show a list of student names. So I'll say students. Okay, and this is going to be names that I see in my screen. So let's say I have several students joining in, so I will name those guys. So I can see Amila here, and who else I can see? Okay, Walpola. Walpola, and who else? I'll take another one name. I can see Sudari. Okay. So say for instance, I like to show these values, the name of the students in my view. Okay, so I have a list of students. I need to show those things in here. So what I'll do is I can come here and I can say students, right? That should work. Students. Okay, so you guys can see right now I can see Amila, Valpola, and Sudari without an issue. But say for instance, I want to show these names in a list or normal UI list that we are familiar with. So I can say UL and we have LI. Okay, so if I try to LI these things in here, it won't work because it's gonna show all the students' names right around like a normal data binding. What I need is I need to LI bind each student in here. So I have 3 students in here. I need to have list items for each. Okay, as you can see, this is not a normal variable. It is what we call array. Okay, so I have ways of defining these arrays, or we can say loop these arrays in more elegant way. So there is something called ng4 that is for using that is used for looping an array of values. Okay, so I need to have two things. First one is if this is going to be an array, and what is going to be the single form of item within that array. So I will say student is a single form from or of a variable called students. Okay, so I have just, let's keep it simple, ng4. Okay, so ng4 is used, and I have list of students. And when I'm iterating through these students, I would like to have one single student as student. We can have S, we can have ST. So whatever the name, whatever the singular form, I will have it as this variable. So it's right now it is complaining ng4 is not known. That is correct, because ng4 is something coming from Angular itself. So we need to have common module, something available for all the, or commonly available for everything. So if you want to use ng4, we call these things directive. So the common directive should be imported using common module, which is coming from Angular commands. So we have to have the Angular common modules in here. After that, the error goes away. Right now, you guys can see the 3 dots have been placed. I want to display one student. So what I'll do is I will mustache base and have students like this. So what it will do, it will create. Let me show the source code so you guys can. Sorry about that. So you guys can see, I'm not sure whether you guys can clearly see, but yeah. So in here I have defined only one UL, and there will be 3 LI items. You can see there's list items, and everything is generated randomly. So even though I define the array, when it is rendering, the 3 elements are rendered around in here as well. So we have the LI items or list items working for us. That means we were able to get the list views in here as well. Okay, don't need inspect. How do I remove this thing? Okay, let me put it all the way down, and I think I need to close it. Give me a second. I need to find the close button. Gosh, it's hard to find the close. Okay. I will change back. All right. So what I did here is a very simple trick that I have looped through, and using ng4, you can do that. So probably currently I think we are in Angular 16. This syntax might change in Angular 17. There are like proposals going on to make it more even simpler, but right now you guys can leverage the ng4 loops like this. Okay, so this is something that gives you guys the power of data binding, the view controller binding that you guys will see in action. Okay, so we have seen the property binding and everything. Now what we will do is we will explore more about the MVC parts, okay, MV model controllers. So what are things, what are the other things that we can do? So next thing I would do is I will just, I will have a simple page in here, and I will see, we can see another MVC in action. So in order to create another component or another page, what I'll do is I will simply create a directory called pages. Okay, this can be whatever you like. I like to call it pages. Whatever you like, you can call it. Right now, I will create a component, another component. You guys need to create component like this. The best thing is you can always generate these components. You don't have to do everything right now. I mean, especially when you want to create a new component, you don't have to copy paste all these files. Everything can be generated. So in order to generate, you need to right click on the directory, and you have this nx generate command. If you don't see the nx generate command, I highly recommend you, I mean, you have to have the nx VS Code extension. So install nx nx console, this plugin, if you don't see that component right there. And probably you will need something called Angular language server. This will help you guys to develop Angular applications much more faster. The error handling and everything will be shown. So have those two installed, so you are good to go. Right now, I want to generate a page. Right now, I will right click and I'll call this nx generate command. And what I'm interested in generating is a component. Okay. So there are like a lot of options in here. So do not get confused. There is nx Angular or semantic Angular components. Either one is okay. So I will use nx component. And what I need to do is I need to give a name for my page. Let's say I want to have a login page. Okay. So I will say login in here. And right now, on the background, you guys can see, I'm not sure. It's trying to create this files or components as we typed in, but it is failing. So the only thing that you need to make sure is, since everything is standalone, make sure the standalone checkbox is selected. Otherwise, it won't generate. Okay. And we can do more customization in here. There are a lot of things that we can change, especially with the URL and everything. But let's keep it simple. And what I did was I have a name, I tick the standalone and I hit generate. So it will create all the files in here. And let me kill this terminal. I don't need this one as well. Probably it is created out of my page directly. That's happens sometimes. The NX tools give this kind of buggy things. So what I'll do is I will move that to pages by simply clicking and move. Okay, right now under pages, I have a component called login. And what I'll do is I'll create another component. So you guys can see. So what I did was I right click on the pages, I hit generate, and I have selected component. Make sure I'm using Angular component. I'll call this about, and make sure to tick standalone and generate. So it will create another component. It's as expected, it is creating out of my page directory, so I'll move it in here. So under page, I have two components now. Okay, and you guys can see the similarities comparing to the app component. Yes, we have the view, we have the controller, and we have the style. Okay, And this is a special file. This is the test file. We will just ignore for it now, but we will look into when we are going to test runs. We will see how this is also used. So right now we have this about, we have this login, and everything is in place. Now what we have to do is I'll just simply explain how the routing process works in this scenario. So you guys can remember there is this app component thing that we had app routing PS. So we can have a router path. Okay, so within this array, create an entry, and we have something called path. That means whoever comes to this path will will show the component itself. So let's say I want to go to about path, and if I go to the about path, what component should it show? It should show about component. Okay, this is simple as that. So if I have another path, let's say I have a login, and what the component that you should show, it's going to be login component. It is that simple. So in order for these app components to work, we need to have something called the app route outlet. Okay, if this route outlet is not presented, we won't be able to see the pages. So basically what happens is the route outlet, this section will be injected by, if I am in the about page will get injected to here. If I am in the login page will get injected to here. So that is like the basics. The routing happens, and beware, this is not the optimal way of doing. This is not doing something called lazy loading. So since it is out of the scope of the MVC application, I would not go there. But if you like, I will share you guys another video how to lazy load everything and make the application more optimal. Right now, we will be working on the architecture itself only. So we will focus on that as for now. So we have a login and about page, but if you look at our implementation in here, is it giving an error? Probably. Okay, so we don't have to have these /. Okay. Right now, we are in the localhost 4200. If I go to about in here, you guys can see the about works message shows that's all in about component. So as you might have guessed, the route outlet section is getting injected with about works page. So if I say login in here, then you guys can see the login will get displayed around here. If I just comment these things out, and you guys can see it is only login because we are only showing the route outlet. If I want to say, if I want to show only about, so if I can say about works. And another thing that we can do is we can have a link. As you guys know, we can have links to about and links to login. Okay, so we can have those things in here. We use something called router link, and we can say about. We can omit this inputs and output. I can say router link. It's gonna be login. Okay, I'll have a break in here so I can clearly see. So now it's in about. If I click on here, it shows login. I'm not sure whether you guys can see clearly. Let me zoom it in. So if I click about, it's going to about route, and if I click login, it's go to the login route. So it's going with the pages and page navigation works. Okay, so this is not the best UI in the world, but it clearly gives you guys an idea how the routing works and everything happens in here. Okay, whatever the let's say I want to change in about page, so I can come here and I can say h1. This is about page. Okay, if I change this, you guys can see since I am in about page, it's rendering out in here. Okay, cool. So we'll go into the next section, which is the model section. So up until this, guys, anyone have any questions with the component creations and mobile module view and controller? Any questions? Okay, good. So we'll move on to the next section, the MV, the first letter M. Okay, we did not get a chance to work with M. So we need a model in order to work with our application. Okay, a model, as you guys can remember, we have something called what we call what we called in MVVM. If you guys can remember, we have something called VM, where the business logic happens. Okay, you can have the same kind of architecture, same kind of feeling in here as well. Rather than writing all your logics that is binded in here, okay, you guys can have the logics written in somewhere else, that is like the model section, where you guys can get the data, where you can model everything in a separate component. So in order to achieve that kind of model, Angular has this special component called services, or special what do you call that? Yes, not the component. How do you say? Service is you can say it is like a service is not a component. It's what we call enabling factor. Let's say enabling factor, or like framework supporting framework support for creating a model. Okay, so in order to do that, we call those things as services. Okay, service is a different concept. We can say, yeah, let's put concept as the word. We have the concept of services in order to create our models. Okay, so it is going to be a model, but in Angular, to enable that, we use something called services to do that. So what I'll do is the best practice is it's up to the project architecture and everything. Perhaps you can have the model within the component that we have created, or if you want, you can have it in a different way. Either way, I'm gonna go with since it is gonna be a very simple one. I'm gonna create a service in the same directory where our component is. That means our view, model, and our controller will be in the same directory. So all you have to do is right click on the module and select NX generate, and you have to search something called service. So make sure we are using semantic Angular service, not service worker. Okay, service worker is something else, another concept. Make sure you select service. Okay, give a service name. Normally, service name I normally follow with the same name as we are getting. We are having it's the same name as our application. Sorry, our component. Since it is about, I will name this one as about as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define a path here. So I will copy relative path in here, or you can just create that one and you have to move it. But I think I can copy relative path in here, and you can say something like this. So it's not gonna create somewhere in random. It says app gain share src app pages about sex. Yes, yes, please. Or you can create it somewhere else and drag and drop, but the path where it's gonna be created, if I can define it, then it's gonna define it there. So that's gonna be easy. So you guys can see now few extra files have been created about service and about spec. So this is going to be the test case for our application, and the service is going to be something what we call a the enabling factor for modules. Sorry, enabling factor for model. Okay. So basically, the service is created, and service is having these annotations, what we call, or decorations, what we call in Angular or TypeScript. So injectable decorator is there. That means this can be inject within our component itself. So if I want to use this model, the about service in my component, all you have to do is I have to go to my component, and I have to define a constructor and use the private about service and a name like this. Okay, I need to import the about service. That's it. So what I have done is I have injected the about service into my about component. Now I have my model, at least the model implementation, inject to my component. So I have this about service in here, and I can get I can work with the about service, like declaring like this. So what we call this is what we call in here is what we call this one is called dependency injection. So now I automatically inject the service into my component. Okay, so the model part is something that we need to do in here. Okay, so we will be defining our models, our business logic within our service itself. So the simplest form is that we can define our models in here, and we can define our application logics even within here. So for example, I will define a simple representation or simple variable within in here. So I will rather than, if you guys can remember, about section, we did not have anything like the students and everything. So what I'll do is I will create a list of students, and I will map it. I will show it in the about sections. Okay, or I'll just simply yeah, let's simply do that first. Let me create. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, give me a second. So rather than going to about component, let me give a good idea. Since this is a game show, I will generate another component. I will say this component index component. I will say this game list component. So I'm gonna show a list of games in here. So I will be using standalone, and I will define a path. So my so the index won't jeopardize it. So I will generate in apps, games, yeah, SRC pages. If I hit generate, it should generate in the correct place. Yes, game list. So what I'll do is I created a new game list component. Let me do one more generation, the service. I will say game list service. Okay, you just say game list, it will add the service part from the generator itself. So I will just have the game list in here, hit generate. So simply I create another component to make it more what do you call user friendly and work with. All right. I will definitely create a route in here as well. Let me create a route. it's gonna be games, and I would say simply games in here. And I need to have the route to that as well, otherwise it won't work. So I will say games component is game list component. There you go. So I have games list work, login, about that as well. So yeah, next thing I would do is game list. So I'm gonna get a list of games and try to show it in here. So that is my intention. I have a list of games and I want to show it in here. So let's start coding. So we can see game list work. This is the view, and this is the controller, and this is the model. So in a good architectural pattern, MVC architecture, as you guys can see, all the games list service is gonna handle all the model related stuff. So everything that is related to getting all the games and everything will be handled by this game service. So we need to model a game. Okay, that is the basic thing. We need to model a game. We need to have a structure of a game. We need to represent a game. So what we can do is we can create another class in here. I will call this one as game interface.ts. Okay, how it's going to represent a game will be within this interface. Okay, you can think it is as the blueprint of our game. This one we can use it. So I will say export. Since it is an interface, I use I keyword as in front to indicate this is an interface, and I will say export interface game. Okay, so this is going to be the definition of a game. So probably you guys have seen modeling in Java or something similar. So a game should have what we call a name. Okay, that is obvious. If I want to show a game, that should have a name, and probably I will use an image, and that's going to be also a string, and probably I can have some other things like price. Okay, it's going to be a number or a string. It's up to the decision of the modeler. Right now, I think a game has these three attributes: the name, image, and price. So this is going to be the looks of our game, and I name it as iGame since this is an interface. But in a list, I will get a list of these things. So I can say there will be private games, which I will not get these games from somewhere from the internet, but I will definitely hard code these things at first. Then we will try to set up a service and get those things from internet. So we have games, and it's gonna be a list of games. Okay, so I need to donate that. Okay, I will have a list of games, and it is going to be in the shape of games, and it's going to be an array. That means we will have array of games. So within here, I can define a single game. So I will just simply Google some games which is available right now. Games 2023, whatever you like. So I have a lot of games in here, surprisingly. Let me get games API. So let me get few of the coming soon games. Okay, I'm gonna take one or two. So one is called Billy's Nightmare. Okay. And it is having this image. Copy image address. Okay, and it has a price. Let's say it is 20. 20. Okay, so this is how we define a one single game in here. So we have Billy's Nightmare, and if I want some other games, I'm not sure. Something similar. Tales of my system, not sure. It's gonna be the name is this, and I will copy an image address. Image is gonna be this, and the price gonna be, let's say, 30. Okay, so we have two games that I have modeled using iGame. So the game will be represented by a name, image, and a price. So let's say that is all we need. So in this scenario, we have modeled our game in here, like using an interface. And now what we need to do is we need to get the list of games. Okay, we need to get this list of games which is in our game service, okay, which is declared as private, into our game component, the component list. So in order to do that, first we need to have a connection with our model, or in this scenario the service. So the easiest part, or the only way that we can do, is using the constructor injection. Okay, we can use the injector. So we can say constructor private, it's going to be the name as it follows like this. So make sure to import this, and we can have access to the constructor itself. Okay, now we have access to the service. Now what we need to do is get the list of games. So we have a games list model in here. Now we need to get it back. So I will define a method called get games, and the method will simply return the games that we have defined. So it's going to basically give us back all the games that we have defined in a static method or static variable. Not static, I mean hard-coded variable. So if I want to access these games in my component, I can go to my component. I can say game list service dot get games. So this will return a list of games. So by returning list of games, I can assign it to a local variable. I can say games, and it will be in type of I games, right? That is the shape of the game. And I can simply say list.games equal list game service, get the list of the used games, and assign it to the variable within the list component. It is named as games. So what we are doing here, we are getting a list of games. Where do we getting that? We are getting that from the list game service get games method. So it will return a list of games like this, which are hard-coded, and we can work on that. So we now have access to all the games within our model using this simple method call. And we have these games. What I can do is within the game list, I can iterate those things, right? So I'll create a div, simple div, and I will create img tag, and I will create a p tag, and I will create another p tag. Let's create a h6 or h5 tag. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to iterate through all these things. As I mentioned, let game of games. So we have sorry, we have the list of games. So now we can iterate like this, and I can say within the game object, I will have something called game.image. Okay, and I will have a game.name, and I will have a game.price. So I have all this, and what I'm trying to do is I'm looping through all these games, which is in iGames. The games is retrieved by this model or service in here by simply calling it out. Let me see. Yes, so I can see all those games, which is like not the website or the CSS. Okay, you guys can see that it is showing in here. It's not going to be the best CSS work that we have done, but it's gives the idea, right? So we have all this information in here, and we can get information, or we can show this information like this. So it's simple. Now, what we simply did was we had our model, we had our controller, and we get the bindings done in here. All right. So we have done the modeling using the interface. We have defined our data using services, and we have retrieved that values from our component itself. So you guys can see the component is getting those data from the service. Service is responsible for giving back the data, and HTML, the view, is responsible for showing that in here. So this is the basic structure that you would see in MVC application. MVC application, you have the view, you have the controller, and you have the model. In this case, what we call a service. So in here, we see the controller as a component, view as a HTML file. So what is the exact use case, or what is the advantage of having such architecture? Why we can't have everything? Okay, we can have these UI, the component, and HTML, everything in one place. What's the benefit of doing such a thing? The first thing is it makes easy for us to create components, or it is easy to differentiate the view and its logics and where the data is coming from. So it's give us the flexibility of defining everything in few places. So our code is easy to learn, easy to read, and we have separation layers, just like we have seen in the NT architecture. Our layers have been separated, and values are coming in a way that we can understand properly. And the next thing is that these kind of application will give us is the testability. We'll see how easy it is to test such a simple component rather than creating a huge component and try to test those things out. In here, the testability is here. So if I want to test this service, I can simply test this service, and the component is not aware of that. And if I want to simply test the view, I can simply test the view, and the service does not need to know about this implementation. So by simply separating this layer each by each, we will get a very good code and very clean code in this sense to work with. Okay, so what I will do is I will do some changes in the UI itself. because let me reset. Yeah, so I will just I'll just put a border around the game. So I will create this class, and I will give a game class, and I will have what do we call these, background color, like something C9. Okay, let me save, so you guys can see these things in little bit clear. Okay, these at least changes are visible. And what I'm gonna do next is introduce the observability to this class. Okay, so how we can observe the changes or in our scenario, how we gonna do observability to work with our application. Okay, so there are few types of observabilities in our application. So one thing is that when we think about observability comes with two different things. First one is the event, and next one is the trigger. Okay, so think observability as we are waiting to something to happen. Okay, we are waiting something to happen, and once it is happened, we based on the event that has happened, we are gonna react to it. We're gonna do some changes. We're gonna do some changes on behalf of that. After that particular event happened, we work on that. Okay, so we are waiting till an event happens. Okay, so that's what we are calling the waiting part. We are waiting something to happen, so we call that observability. So we are observing the changes that is happening in our application. So let's see it in action in here. So in this scenario, games are loaded by the constructor. There is no event happening. The event actually within the constructor itself. The games are taken from the application itself, or from the constructor level. We call the service and we get the data back. But we want to load the games based on an event. Okay, we want to load our things. We want to load the games based on an event. So we need to have that event design. The first thing is that we might need to do is, let's say we want to trigger a button click event. Okay, we want to click on a button, and once that button is clicked, then and only we want to load our data. So in order to do that, we can first we need to create a button, right? So I will create a button, and I will say get games. Okay, so basically it's gonna show something like this. All right, the UI is not that good, so I will just make it a little bit more readable. So I will say display flex, and flex. This will have a padding of, I don't know, 8 pixels. Yeah, so we have the get games button right now. You guys can see the get game button is here. Right now it is not doing anything. We have this event, so we will select, we will put a event listener or observer to react on this button action. Okay, so the basic thing that we need to do is when we have such a thing is we need to define what is the action that we're going to be react upon. So button has a button has certain actions that we can react upon. One is the click event. Okay, so there are like double click and long click and everything, but we will simply work on the click event. Okay, so this is what we call output binding. That means event binding into a button. So this once this button is clicked, what should happen? So I will say once this button is clicked in our controller, we will have a button name. We will have a function called on get games. Okay, so we will have a function called on get games. I will trigger that. Okay, and while I'm triggering this, who triggered this or the event which is responsible for triggering this thing will be passed as $event. So I can capture the event as I do that. So I'll have a method called onGameEvent, and it will pass an event. That means who triggered this button, and I can capture it there. So I have to go to my component. I need to create a function, and it will give me an event. It's going to be a generic event. Let's take it as a generic event. Right now, I'm going to just console log it, and I'll show what the content is. So let me go to inspect and go to console and zoom in a little bit. And if I click get games, you guys can see event is triggered. That is the event that I passed in here, the get game and the event. This is the $event. $event corresponding to whatever the original event. It is the same thing that you guys can see in the log app itself. So this is going to be a mouse event, as I can see, a pointer event. Since I am in normal click event, so it's going to be a pointer event. Okay, so rather than working with generic event, so it's going to be a mouse event, right? Should be a mouse event. Okay, so now it's more generic. We know it's a mouse event. We can have some things like the target, the button or the key, whether it is face. So I just put target in here, and if I click here, and I can see which button it was triggered upon. Okay, it's going to give me the target element if I want it. But right now, what I need to do is I'm not interested in the event itself, but I am interested in getting the list of games populated. So right now, the games is empty. What I need to do is I need to get when I click on this button, I need to trigger another event. Or I need to load some data into my application. So what I'll do is I'll simply call the game service, and I'll call the get game method, and I will when it is returning some games, I will assign it to this variable in our controller. So right now I'm going to close this, and if I hit get games, you guys can see the UI, it is generating the list of games in here. So let me make it a little bit more clear. The HTML is not the best work. Okay. Get games, was it in a column? Okay. But we can say this flex direction column. Okay, you guys can see in our UI, once you hit get games in here, when I hit get games, all the games are populating in my UI. So I am reacting to an event, and I am getting the values from the model, and I am trying to display it in here. So the observability or listening into one application or one's events is completed or done by this. So you will say basically, okay, that is like you are clicking on something and you are getting a value, yes, but the concept that you guys need to learn is observability. Okay, this is happening only when we click on the button. Unless you click on the button, it won't happen. Okay, so observability, listening to an event and reacting upon that is achieved by something like this. So there can be many events happening within the application. Okay, we can create by one thing that we saw is within the constructor. That means whenever the component is creating, we are loading the data, or we can simply have this method that we are having, and it is also gonna work as well. So this is a simple example of observability, and we can simply get and show values by simply using these tactics. Any questions up until this, guys? The constructor injection, the introduction of model, and everything. You guys have any questions up until this? Okay. If you have anything, just ask me on the chat or just raise your hand and ask. Okay. So we talked about the model controller view, and the next thing is that we're gonna do is the advantages. Why do we need such MVC architecture? What is the advantage that we are seeing in here when we are doing that? So to give such advantage, I would go for something in our application, the spec file. Okay, this spec file represent the testing components of our application. So most of you guys will ignore the testing, but remember, as a good software developer or an architect, testing is one of the most crucial things, because by writing test cases, you become a good programmer. Believe me, it is something that I have seen in a lot of cases. So in this scenario, the logic is not that big. You guys can see we are just simply changing some of our application, and we are seeing the values right around here. Okay, but when we introduce test cases, when we have testing within our application, the whole perspective of writing code, it is changing. Okay, you need to make sure your code is testable. Right now, the code that we are having is okay. We can see we don't see nothing big happening in here, but when a business logic comes in, our code will get more complicated, more hard to manage. So in that scenario, we need to make sure our test will cover and it will not break any existing thing. By introducing new things, it can break existing things. So we can get a little bit of closure by simply saying, okay, even though we change our code, it is not going to break the existing system. That is one of the crucial points when we are looking at. So I will just simply show you guys the list service spec file. So it is corresponding to this list service, and we have list service spec.ts. So basically this spec file is what we call a unit testable application. That is mean we're going to be simply testing the logic within this service itself. Okay. And this spec file, it is going to give us a little bit of um, easy mechanism to test everything. If you guys can remember the if you want to test our UI and everything, we need to load everything, right? If I want to show image and everything, we need to have a browser logged in, and we need to see an image. We need to have the UI loaded in order to test everything. But in a unit test, that is not the case. I mean, there are some unit tests we need to load some UI components, but in this scenario, we are not loading everything. We are only testing a small portion of our application. Right now, we are going to be testing the functionalities between the game list service. In order to do that, you guys can see that we do not depending on much of other things. So when we are unit testing, we should not load everything related to Angular, the app component, configuration, app routes. No, we do not need that. We simply need to load the game list component, which you can see in here, and by using the spec file, we will be testing the game list service by using this spec file. So we will be only focusing on the functionalities between the game list service. So while we are doing that, it's going to be super fast. The unit test will be super fast compared to loading everything, the Angular and everything, compiling everything. You don't need to load everything. All you have to load is this service and test it. Okay, so let's see the spec file, what it shows and what it's gonna give us. So as I mentioned earlier, testing is one of the crucial components in the software development, and there are a lot of and different type of testing available. So in here, we'll be doing a unit test. Okay, so the unit testable component is going to be our game list service. So we'll be writing unit tests for our game list service. Okay, and by doing that, we are only needing to load the game list service. We are not interested in the component HTML or whatsoever. We'll be only focusing on the game list service only. So since this is acting as our model, we can safely say we are testing our model in our application. So we need few things in order to work with the model. In order to work with this model, we need few things. So first thing is a test runner. Okay, the test runner. Since you are using Angular CLI or NX CLI, the test runner is set up for us. We don't have to worry about setting up the test environment and everything, test software and everything. It is automatically done for us. But if you're curious, what is the test environment that we are using something called Jest. Okay, out of this NX environment, we are using the unit testing framework called Jest. It is available on most of the frameworks. If you are using React, you can use Jest as simple as there as well. So the testing part is not only not something Angular has it, or it is not. If you are using Jest, you can use it in Angular as well. By the way, Jest is also written by Facebook, if I can remember, at least initiated. And the good thing about having Jest is that we can run these tests and see whether these things are working as expected. So you can see this is right now I am debugging at this, so I'm not going to do that. So in order to work with these testing components, if you don't see this run or debug sections, make sure you have installed the just test runner as extension, and then it will show this run and debug button. Okay. So in order to test a component, write a unit test in any section, we have something called few known mechanisms for it. Okay. So if you are a good programmer, or you are trying to automate everything, these things are pretty much common for any framework. It's only syntax will be here and there changing, but other than that, everything will be similar. So the first thing is going to be what we call a describe block. Okay, a describe block would definitely help us to describe the describe in the sense it's like a grouping of our test cases. So this is going to be a group of this is going to describe the test cases of this game, this service. Okay, so we can have multiple describe blocks if you want. You can have describe blocks within a describe blocks, even that is possible. And one other thing that we need to have is this what we call test lifecycle methods. So before we run a test, it has few lifecycle methods. So one you guys can see in here, before each. Before each is the test case which is running. Whatever the content of this before each function will be executed before each of these test cases are run. So you can see a test case in here. It shows it and what is it's gonna test. So consider this as a test case right now, and we can have multiple test cases like this. Okay. So when we have multiple test cases, before each of these test cases are executed, the content of this before each lifecycle method will be executed before each of these test cases. And there are few other lifecycle events as well. So we have before each and we have before all. Before all. Okay. So before all, it's going to be something like will happen once of these test cases is started, at least within this describe block. Within this describe block, before all of these test cases are running, or before all these things are before all these test cases are about to run, whatever we have defined in here will execute. Okay, so it is like what we call a pre-ramp, or whatever the data that we need, or maybe a database connection, that kind of thing will be handled within this before all. And before each, as I mentioned earlier, each and every text execution before the next one comes, the before each will execute. And there are other lifecycle methods after all, and there's the counterpart after each. Okay, so there are other lifecycle methods as well. So as the name suggests, after all these test cases are executed, after all method and its content will be executed. After each, it is the opposite of this. After each of these test cases are executed, the after each method will be executed. So this is before the test execution. This is after each of these text execution. So we have these methods to control our test cases. But remember, when we are writing a unit test, the main concept, the key concept is that we do not want these test cases to be interfering with each other. Say, for example, I have 10 unit test which is written in here, and those 10 unit tests should not interfere with each other. So that is the number one rule of writing unit tests. Don't have dependencies on each of these tests. So first thing that we need to do is we'll look into before each. That means before each of these tests are getting executed, what we do is we are injecting our test cases, our test class. Okay, so you guys can remember this is not a normal class that we can test. We have these injectables and angular base decorators and everything. So in order to create that, it is not going to be the simple terms of like creating a new object. So in order to help to create test cases, what we can do is use something called from Angular. We have something called test bed. Okay, so if you want to create a simple, if you want to write test cases for this service, to instantiate it, to create that service, we will use something called testbed and configuration module, and using the testbed inject method, we can get a instance of the game list service. Okay, that means before each and every test case that we're going to be executing, we will create a new instance of the game list service that that makes sure we are having a fresh game list service to be checked. That means whenever the test, each and every test is running, all the test cases in here will refer to a new service instantiation. So the earlier service is not available. Before each and every test, it is creating a fresh game list service and executing its test. So that is like the important thing that we are doing in here. So before each represent that each and every test case where they are executing in here will get a brand new game list service. Okay, and here comes the test itself. So to indicate it is a test, we use this it keyword. Okay, and it should naturally speak what we are trying to tell, test. So it should be created. So you guys can see if you read this in a normal English, you guys can see that it says it should create. That means the game list service should create. That is the basic definition or basic understanding or basic expectation out of this test. Okay, so it should create. So whatever executed in here, we will what we call this assert these changes. That means we are checking whether it is true or not, or it is as we expected. So we can say we should when we execute this test, we should expect the service to be truthy. That means the service should be truthy in the sense it should be created. For some reason, if we can't create the service, then the expect to be truthy will be giving us an error and it will fail. So that in that way we know for sure the test case, it should be created when this one is executed without an error. The service should be created. And how do we check whether it is created? We can say expect the service to be truthy. Truthy means it is when using you don't know the value. If it is false, null, or undefined, or NaN, if nothing is other than these 6 components, six values, everything else will be true. That means, say for some reason, the service is giving us an undefined. That means we can't define that code. The test bed can't create this service. That means the service is not creating for some changes we have done. So what will happen is it will return undefined. Okay, so we by now simply, if I go on top of this test case, this particular test case, and hit run, it should say pass. Okay, the test, you can see it should be created is giving a green go. That means this test case is passing without an issue. That means without an issue, our test is passing. Okay, we can run all the tests. Right now we have only one test case in here, but we can now run all the test cases by executing the disk on top of describe block. We can see run. If I run that, it should create is only thing here, then it is executed. Now let's see how we can create a test case. Let's create something our own. So writing test case is pretty much easy, and sometimes it is sometimes giving us some things we need to think twice about our application itself. So for example, we have a method called getGames. Okay, we have a method called getGames. So what is the basic functionality of this getGames is that it should return these 2 games, right? These 2 game representation, it should return. That is the basic expectation of our of this method. That is simply what it is doing. It is simply returning these 2 games. So in here, let's assume for a moment, this is the method only gonna return us 2 games. Okay, we assume this method is gonna return us only 2 games. So there is one test case that we can run, that we can write is, if I call this getGames method, it should return 2 items. So that is one test case. Okay, and if I call this getGame methods, the second game's name should be Tales of Meteor. Okay, that is another thing. So all those 2 things, what we call positive test cases. So we check what is there. It is what we call a positive test case. And there should be another thing what we call a negative test case. Negative test case in the sense, it should not have these values. For example, it should not have, when we call this getGame method, it should not return 3 games. Okay, in here you guys can simply see it is gonna return 3 games, 2 games. So it should not have 3 games. And you can also say the getGames method should not be empty. That means there should be at least one or more games within that method call. So those things will be tested out. So as you can see, the method is only one simple method returning games, but we can come up with 4 different test cases. Okay, so we in here while we are using this test architecture or writing test, we get a better understanding of our code. Okay, if somebody comes and add another game in here and that is not the expected outcome of this, then it will say, okay, somebody has changed the logic, now it is no longer working. So that's kind of thing we can expect from our application. So what we need to do is we need to make sure the expected behavior remain the same. So I can say it should return more, it should not return empty. Empty. How do I spell empty? Oh, empty. There's a T, right? Empty game list. Okay, this is one of our test cases. And another test case is so it should return the second game name as what we call second name game as Tales of Mathia. Okay, Tales of Mathia. And we can write another test case. It should let's take this let's think this is always going to be two lists, so it should return only two games. Okay, so we have three test cases. We can write any other test cases as we like, but remember these test cases that we are going to run, the test cases that the testing mechanisms or whatever we are going to testing, it should scope, or it should be value within our business logic. If this business logic is changing, it is not always going to be 2, but then the test case is wrong. We are writing something not a valid test case, but it can be like not empty, that can be true, and it something like it should always return the second one as Tales of Mathia, that can be false. As I mentioned, it should be always the use case of the business case itself. But we can say it should return it should have, let's say it should have a price on every game. Okay, so that is something we can test. Okay, we can say it should have price on every game. Every game should have a price. That is true, right? You can expect every game should have a price, so we can test that out. Or we can say something simple, every game should have an image. Okay, something like that. And we can say it should have a not empty game name. Okay, that means whenever we are trying to iterate, there should not be an empty game name. That means something like this we can't have like that, so we can test that as well. So those games, so the one that we have written in here, this one and this one, make more sense rather than the restriction to 2 games. But as I mentioned earlier, if it is a use case, then you should write it. But in general, this is not going to be a use case for that, so we will be not expecting that. So we have added 3 more test cases. Now we go to the implementation, how we're going to test it. Okay, simply we will have brackets. It should not return empty games. Okay, so we will say const games. So we call the service get games. So we get the list of games. So we can simply check expect games. We can have not to be games length. Okay, games not to be 0. So what we are saying is expect the game's length. So since the we are returning a list of games, I games, and that games variable have a the games array has something called a length, and it should not be 0. That means we are always expecting something more than 0. Let's run it. And one test case failed. Okay, so we did not have the implementation in here. Always we need to have a implementation. So we skipped one, but we used it should not return an empty game. It is passed. We skipped one because I run only this one. But if I run everything in here, yes, both of our test cases are running perfectly. Okay. So the next thing that we should implement, it should have a price on every game. So what we can do is we can write a test case like that. We can say const games service get games. Okay, and we got every games. And what we can do is we can check. There are different ways that we can check. Okay, so first one of the things that we can do is get all the games, and we can have something like a map. Okay, in every game has .g.price. So I map all the game prices into a new array. So I will call this prices. Okay, and what I can do is I can say expect prices, not prices, not to not to contain undefined. Okay, so that means I expect all the prices. So what I did was I took all the prices only to a new array, and I expect not to contain any undefineds. That means all the games should be defined. Let's run it. As you guys can see, it is passing without an error. Okay, so the next thing that we can test is that it should what is this? It should not have empty game names. That means we can't have any empty game names. So let's test that one out as well. So I can do the same thing. First I get all the games, then I will map. This time I will map the name. Okay, so I can say expect in here. Now this is names rather than prices. Names not to contain anything like this. So if it is containing an empty value like this test is gonna be fail. Right now everything is passing. Let's run everything in here, and you guys can see every test case is passing without an issue. Let's say the value. Let's see the value of this thing. So for example, somebody in our API or someone who is newly joined, they are not aware of these things. They will create another game, and I will just simply have an empty name. Okay, everything will be same. There will be price of 40. Let's assume the images cover is the same. And what I will do is this person or this new guy have come and did this change, and it is working, right? It is working. If I look in the UI, okay, it seems to be working. The UI seems to be working now. It is showing the game, and everything works fine. And if this process goes, then a user can expect, okay, this is working as expected. But if he run the test cases what will happen is a test case will fail, and it will say this. Okay, the game list server should not have empty game names. Expect to be this, not to contain, but expected value is there. Okay, so Bill, Nightmare, Tales of Mathia, and there is an empty one. So what will happen is, by simply having this test case, we are guaranteeing our logic is remaining without an issue. So this is a good thing when we are writing our code and we are writing the test cases against it, will protect our data and will protect the application itself. So as you guys can see, the method is considerably 3 lines. We can even take this into a one single line even. Okay, it is a that simple method, but see how many test cases we were able to run out of it. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that is like the expected code behavior. If I was to code, if I was asked to do a code, the less amount of coding but more amount of testing make sure or guarantees our application runs smoothly. Okay, our application is doing good. More test cases we have, that ensures our application is working perfectly. So I think you guys can take this into an example. Write few test cases, something like this. Don't, I mean, you can obviously start from something like this. Write a test case for something like this. Say get games with prefix. Okay, so prefix. Okay, so what will happen in this method is it's gonna return these games, but only a minor modification is there. This get games dot map, that is every game that we are returning. Okay, I will return the game without an issue, but the game name will be different, right? GAME underscore and G dot name. So G dot name. So there is a new method. Simply it's gonna return the games, but in here, what you will see is when we are returning it, we are actually changing the game name. Every game name is now prefixed with something called game underscore. And that is the game name that we are returning back. That means game name with prefix will return a new name rather than what we see in here. Okay, so Tales of Mathia, let's say this. So this 2. Okay, right now our test case should fit. Task: write a test case for this scenario. Okay, write a test case on this scenario, and you guys will get a lot of understanding, because there is a special use case in here, game underscore name. So we should expect the game name to start with game underscore and whatever the game name. So write a test case on this, at least 5 test cases on this method, and see yourself what is the expected test cases that you can come up with. Okay, so that is one of the assignments that you guys need to work on, and you don't have to write it in an Angular project or something like that. Just have a even a simple JavaScript or TypeScript project will do. Okay, since we are testing on this section only. Okay, so one thing that we worked on this section, that now completely we did not think anything about the UI, right? We did not think anything about the UI or anything else. we were just mainly focusing on the game service and it is data. Okay, so you guys can clearly see by simply splitting things up, by splitting our models, view, and controllers, we can individually test these components without an issue. Okay, so we are not depending on the view or the controller. By simply testing our service, we can get a proof that okay, our test is working perfectly. So that's what I want to that's what I want to convey in this lecture. By separating these kind of applications, we can simply get a lot of things in an easy manner. The main thing is the testability improves. Okay, our testability improves rapidly when we are having separate layers or separate architectures like MVVM. So have a look around this, have the testing going on and see how it's good in our application creation and everything, so you guys get a better idea of this. So we have done the modeling, we have done the view, we have done the controllers and everything. So it's up to you guys to get and practice these things. Okay, this is just the starting point. If you want do more exercises on this as you might. Okay. So apart from that, I would like to go into observability, streaming and everything. But today I think I had enough with the components and MVC architecture and everything. So I'll just put a pin on this. Next time we will see how we can use streams and reactiveness into our application. Okay, so we'll just have seen some of the basics of events, but we haven't dug into event streams, how we can handle a stream, how we can work with streams in our application. So let's see that in the next tutorial or next lecture. So any questions up until this, guys? Anything that you guys need to explain? Okay, hope not. Let me stop.